All right. Hello, everyone. Let's give it another minute. Looks like people are still entering the room, and we'll get started. There we go. All right. All right. Let's go ahead and get started. I still see some people coming in. We have a very exciting topic this week, for this month, I should say. I have some amazing speakers to help me cover this topic. We're going to talk in our SAM best practice, and today is on the CMDB, the Configuration Management Database. Many ITAM shops recognize and know that they have amazing data, and as ServiceNow, CMDB is a core component to the ITIL processes. Getting that data that we have in ITAM into the CMDB so that they can open the correct ticket to the right device and solve the correct problems. So today I have with me Clayton and I have Stephen. So let's give a second here. Let's let them introduce themselves. Clayton, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Clayton Starko here with Flexera, and I lead a team underneath Solution Architecture and Advisory. And focus areas is ITAM and ServiceNow from a practitioner's perspective. And I joined Flexera from being really where you folks are and how you folks are joining today and your interest in this conversation, and led IT service management teams and stood up ITAM programs, and really excited about this topic. And it's so fundamental and foundational to how we drive, to Mark's point, IT service management and ITAM and those competencies forward. And especially now, I think more than ever, where we're seeing the convergence of cloud-based architecture and the way we work in the cloud versus the old traditional on-prem, we're seeing a lot of movement, and it's so fluid, and that's exciting to me. And it's all fundamentally based off of how accurate your data is in the CMDB. So I'm very passionate. You'll see that about myself. I'm very animated and really looking forward to diving in today with you folks.
Awesome. Thanks, Clayton. Stephen.
Yeah, all right. Nice to meet everyone. I'm Stephen Morris. I am an architect here at Flexera. I was a senior product manager. But my history and my background is mostly in the development side and architecture side, and I decided to go back where I feel a little bit happier or more comfortable, I guess you'd say. So I've been a developer in ServiceNow, and then architect, team lead, etc. for about in that space for about 11 years. And so I will be the technical person on this call. So thank you very much. Nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen. Great. Let's go ahead and get to the agenda. So what we're going to cover today is, what am I going to get out of this session? So we'll give you some highlights there. We'll set the stage. We'll talk a little bit about value drivers. We'll share some common terminology, and then talk about Flexera One integration. And then at the end there, Stephen will give us an amazing demo showing how we take your information and put it into CMDB. And then throughout the whole session, please, if you have questions, thoughts, go ahead and post them in the Q&A, and we'll incorporate it as we're working through it. We're looking forward to your questions. Mm-hmm. All right. So after this session, you should gain a better understanding of the top value drivers in this integration. You'll gain a better understanding of what IT operations management. You'll gain a better understanding of Flexera One integration, and you'll get a chance to see the demo, which is what we're most excited about. And then, so let's set the stage a little bit here. And I'm going to share this with Clayton. Talk to us about the top value drivers.
Right. I think what's really important about this, and I'll let folks consume the slide while we talk to it here, is if the quality of the data in the CMDB, and if you look at it from a ServiceNow perspective, they look at it from three primary metrics. They look at it from completeness, correctness, right, and trustworthy data. If none of those things line up and they're true, all of the tech stacks that sit above that, all of the modules within ServiceNow, there's going to be a challenge in actually maximizing the use of those modules. So think about it from a not only process effectiveness, but also think about it from a ability to upgrade and migrate to the latest renditions of the platform. Washington's out, right? If that foundational data isn't sound, right, we can't then drive that automation, where ServiceNow foundationally is a workflow automation engine, right? The data isn't sound and trustworthy, we can't drive that automation. We can't maximize the horsepower of ServiceNow. So we're looking at time to value. We're looking at ensuring that the ServiceNow operational teams and product owners of the platform can actually leverage the data, and they don't have to mine and understand and affect the data, right? We want to move from being data miners to data consumers. That leads us into productivity improvement, right? We can be more productive when we trust the data, obviously, and then also operationally, right? We're trusting the data in the CMDB. The data is enriched. Your ITSM processes can leverage it. We have effective, if we look at it from a life cycle perspective, we have life cycle dates that we can leverage to drive effective process. And that's what this really is all about.
These are great points. There's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. Many customers will ask us, the value of Flexera's data and, what's different about Flexera versus what ServiceNow. And we like to look at, first of all, ServiceNow is a great platform. Mm-hmm. There's no addition. And what they do extremely well is the system of record. So when you need, this is a system of record so that when they execute, they know where it's coming from. Where Flexera comes in is we're the system of insight. It's that data, that quality data with the life cycle information, as Clayton was describing. The quality of data is really what fuels the system of record. And I wanted to share one story here. We get a chance to meet lots of customers. We get to understand the dark side of challenges of trying to maintain this data. And we were working with one large insurance company, and there was an individual that was very proud of the fact that, on Friday afternoon, he exports all the data out of the CMDB. Throughout the weekend, he's cleaning it up and making sure that the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, things are spelled correctly. You know how big the CMDB records are. Combing through it, and then on Sunday night, he pushes it back into the CMDB. And then it's a rinse, lather, repeat. And it's a manual process, but he took great pride in it. And the moment that we did a proof of concept to show them that we had this normalization capability and that we're going against Technopedia to dot the I's, cross the T's, then it was a totally different. He became our biggest fan. And now he gets his weekends back. He gets to see the process. I share it because I'm sure there's a little bit of that going on today because, no one's aware that we bring this secret sauce to the table. So, all right. Clayton, can you take us through some of the complexity?
Little bit of an eye chart here, but there's some really good insights. And really, it's just to piggyback on what Mark is saying, allowing those teams to focus on leveraging the data and not having to effectively clean the data. And that's what this really is all about. If you think about your journeys when you're establishing CMDBs, and I've done a few CMDB reboots working with organizations previously, where we started to gain success was we aligned the journey of the CMDB against use cases and business outcomes that we needed to either execute on or solve for. And for us, our primary use case was mitigate risk and impact the change, which means, as an example, our infrastructure teams submitting change requests on Windows servers, we'll pick on them, we needed to be quite confident that the change requests that we were submitting, we understood as we inserted that CI into the change request, and we looked at the upstream and downstream relationships, we were confident that when we were to effectively execute on that change, we weren't going to cause an outage, right? And that's all about trusting that data. That's all about improving our ability to actually execute on that change and not having to follow or adhere to our risk levels and having to deal with an outage, as I mentioned before. Change management is huge with the CMDB. As we're impacting infrastructure, think about all of the different stacks or principal classes as you start to build your programs out. You need to be confident, your teams need to be able to leverage the data. What we don't want to see here, we don't want to see teams creating their own systems of records within their tech stacks, and the CMDB exists, but it's not being leveraged, right? So we want to actually bring them in, and the teams, the CMDB ownership, if it's a SACM team or whomever owns that CMDB, we want them to be stewards of the data and not actually owners of the data. And that's so important. We struggled, another story from my practitioner experience, we struggled to actually hand the keys, if you would, the ownership of the data to the effective stacks or principal classes because they didn't trust the data. So having buy-in early on in the process and making them a part of actually touching and feeling and getting to know the data, if you would, allows us then to become stewards as opposed to ownership from a CMDB perspective.
Great points. Great points. So we put together some terminology. What is IT operations management? Do you want to walk us through this, or?
Yeah,
thoughts?
table stakes, you guys. I mean, looking forward to some comments in the chat here. But IT operations management is just keeping the house in order, right? There's so much, effectively how much that we can impact an organization with this actual discipline in ITOM is incredible. Whether it be just pure operational management, whether it be looking at performance, whether it be availability and even capacity planning, if we're looking at it from that perspective. And of course, it all comes down to cost, right? We want to be as efficient as we can. We want to be able to report the efficiency of what we're running in order to drive forward.
Great points. Great points. Hopefully, one, as the Q&A comes in, two, you're able to leverage this in your decks, as you describe the role and how you support it. So here's some additional common terminology. The configuration management database, I think we talked a little bit about that. Can you give us a little bit of a high level on what service graph is?
Right. You know what? I'm going to actually tap on Stephen on this one, and let's bring in a bit more of a technical. Stephen's sitting there drinking his coffee and enjoying the conversation, and let's chat a little bit around service graph.
Man, remember I was here. That's good. Actually, going back to what you were just talking about too, I had one thing I like to think about when it comes to IT operations management in terms of what we're doing here. When you're saying being able to understand your scope of what be able to plan resources, all those things, normalization kind of helps you understand your environment, right? And then you have, life cycle information kind of helps you understand the urgency. And then the business service mapping kind of helps you understand the priority, right? So all those things come together and they're all, vital to really run that efficiently. But anyway, getting into service mapping, service graph, there we go. So service graph is essentially a program or an offering by ServiceNow. You have to meet certain governance to be a part of it. It's part of the integration hub package. It's a paid for offering, but the program itself, like in order to qualify, you have to go through, you have to meet certain governance for one, and the governance is fairly strict. And then there is technical reviews that you have to go through. There's some some additional customer testing that's required, but it's all built on top of the same architecture that's available essentially for free in the program too. It's not anything specific or special in that regard. It's more of a governance, so to speak, and it's a program. And then as you go through it, you have to actually get like approval from them from a business perspective that, hey, yes, even if you meet the governance, even if you've gone through the technical reviews and you've aced everything, it doesn't mean that they'll let you into the program. Even if your application meets all of the standards, it doesn't mean that they'll let you into that program. There are certain could be conflicts of interest and things like that. But at its core, it's essentially a UI on top of some functionality that exists in the program, or I'd say in ServiceNow already. There's some core and foundational pieces that you can install that have all that same core architecture that you need.
Great.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and there's a key point here that I think we should call out. We've worked with ServiceNow to have our solution be a part of the service graph process, if you will. And if I remember right, at the 11th hour, because we got too close to our capabilities.
Yeah, that's true. So we did our newest integration, the one I'll show. We were creating a quote unquote service graph connector, and we went through the technical process and the reviews and passed all that. It came down to a business decision ultimately, because we do have a little bit of overlap with ServiceNow in terms of offerings that they rejected it eventually. It was a business decision. I get it. I mean, I would do the same thing, but you don't want to help your competition in that regard. But the integration itself still follows like the governance and all the technical pieces that you would with Service Graph.
Great. Yeah, just wanted to bring a little clarity there.
Yeah, good point.
All right. Let's see. I think we covered these. Or I don't know if we wanted to touch on common service data models or identify reconciliation engine.
I can speak to CSDM a little bit, and for those on the phone, it was a welcome addition when ServiceNow dropped the model. And one of the organizations I worked with, we implemented at the Calgary release. And for those of you on the phone that are long haulers with ServiceNow, ServiceNow obviously focused primarily on IT service management as they built up the platform, aligning it to ITIL, et cetera. And as they were still building out the applications, some of us practitioners were a little bit ahead of that curve, and we went ahead and built our own custom applications to support what we needed to from a business perspective. And one of those was release management. So if you remember, folks on the call, change management was relatively, it was established within the platform. It wasn't actually tied to release. What we did at my organization is we actually built that application, and obviously it served the purpose. When we started to upgrade and move to the next city, and we moved forward, we soon realized that the new capabilities that ServiceNow and functionality they were releasing, we couldn't take advantage of because we had a custom app. And when CSDM dropped, I think it was around Kingston, if I remember, when CSDM
I think that's
came
right.
out. We actually jumped aboard that because it provided a little governance with us internally, so that we could actually follow some sort of a framework and ensure that as we progressed through the cities, we could take full advantage of the capability. Now, I'll be brutally honest with you, unwinding some of that customization is challenging in organizations. We've heard the term replatform. I don't know if folks on the call have heard that as well. We've talked about that with previous organizations, and ServiceNow was really adamant at one point. That's the recommended approach. Replatform, align to CSDM, start from out of box. And what we're seeing now, and what I'm experiencing, and Steve and Mark chime in, is organizations are taking a bit of a hybrid approach where they're not going to time box and go pure vanilla because it's expensive. What they're doing is they're unraveling and unwrapping what they can from a customization perspective in order to take advantage of what they need to in terms of new functionality, but they're leaving the customization where it makes business sense. So it's interesting where it was a hard, that's our recommendation, make that happen. And organizations have said, we hear you. We want to adhere to CSDM 4.0. We want to follow that methodology. However, there's a lot of, cost, resourcing, et cetera. So we're taking an actual risk approach to this and saying, how much effort do we want to put into actually doing that? Is the customization supporting the business outcomes that we want? We're just going to leave it as is.
Good points. Good points. And the reason that we're sharing this is just to help level set that, yes, we do understand the key components, and that as we go through our solution and how we're able to help, we can help drive and show the value of what we're bringing to the table in terms of the data into the CMDB. So Clayton, if you could kind of walk us through how this, the populating of the CMDB.
Yeah, sure. This is right from ServiceNow, again, with our technical partnership. So folks on the phone are probably very familiar with how we ingest the data. Whether we're bringing in logical CIs are actually discoverable from either third party or leveraging ITOM discovery, ACC, or a service graph to bring in inventory. What's really important here, and I'll get Stephen to talk about this because I want to double click on the IRE, but that's really, I guess, when you're looking at multi-source CMDBs and how we're bringing in that data, ServiceNow recognized the fact that there needs to be gates and controls and rules in place to ensure we're actually populating what we should be, where we should be, from both a hardware and software perspective. So maybe I'm just going to ask Stephen, let's double click on IRE and let's talk a little bit about the hardware aspect of those rules and software and how that really applies. And then furthermore, when we inject our integration, how we actually leverage that capability.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say IRE is really fundamental to multi-source integrations in ServiceNow when it comes to hardware. If you have single source data, it's not really, it's not going to make that huge of a difference. Where it really shines is with multi-source data, which is what most people have most companies have that at this point. So whether that's SCCM in ServiceNow Discovery or SCCM, Flexera, Intune, whatever the case may be, there's usually going to be an overlap in the discovery sources and the data that they're collecting and the data that you want to populate into ServiceNow. Using the old transform maps was extremely difficult, the old version of the transform maps, because you really had to tune each one using scripting, et cetera, to make sure it was just populating what you wanted it to for each one, for each data source. But with IRE, you can kind of it's a lot easier to manage that whole process, as long as your data sources all use it. And that's one of the key pieces there. Like if you have one that doesn't want to play in the sandbox with everyone else, then that one can be a problem. But as long as everything is using IRE and using it appropriately, then that's where it shines. And in order to use it appropriately, you have to be writing to the sysobject source table, because that's what reconciliation rules use. And I'll kind of talk real quick through that. So identification, IRE stands for Identification Reconciliation Engine. The identification part is basically how it looks at the values of records coming in to determine how it should coalesce it. and it applies it the same for everything in that class. So all the data sources coming in, you have a set identification rules that it uses to process the data. And then the reconciliation engine is how you tell it, which data sources do you want to have priority for different values, different classes, et cetera, out of the data sources that you have. So you could say, everything for this class, I want, ServiceNow Discovery to have priority for, or actually, no, I want ServiceNow Discovery to have priority for these 5 fields, and then I want Flexera to have priority for these 2 fields, and SCCM to have priority for everything else. It all depends on who do you trust the most, what are you trying to accomplish for that class. So that's I'll leave it at that for now. I'll talk about more later.
Great. No, this is good. And I think it helps set the stage pretty nice for the demo. Mm-hmm. All right. So we talked a little bit on the common service data model. Was there anything in particular we wanted to call out from this slide in terms of how Flexera impacts?
These are just the points that we're connecting to in this common service data model, I should say, with the integration. The ones that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's important to just understand. I guess that is the whole importance of this slide, is to say that we're affecting and we're aligned to the CSDM, right? And we're looking to actually extend that a little bit more. There's some exciting. The future is bright, Stephen. There's some exciting things coming down the path as we plug in more, right? And we're able to extend what we're able to do within the CMDB. But it's just really important to highlight that yes, we are aligned. We're definitely aligned to the model and adhere to it.
Got it. So there's no custom tables or anything. We're following the blueprint that ServiceNow provides. And right. We're putting them right into the actual tables that they're providing for us, and not creating Flexera files. So it helps bring that clarity.
And that's really important for the processes in ServiceNow. I mean, you need the data to live where it's supposed to be, not in some custom field, some custom table. Otherwise, you have to basically re-engineer things or to point that functionality at that new table, new field, et cetera. And then that bites you in the rear when it comes time to upgrade.
Got it.
So, yeah, it's best to keep things where they belong.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the Flexera One integration now that we've set it up. So what we're looking at here is if you go to the ServiceNow App Store and you type in Flexera, you'll see the Flexera One. Stephen, you did a lot of work to improve and bring this to the store. Do you want to talk to this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Flexera essentially brought me in to kind of help with the integration. I came in when we were starting this one, quickly changed the design and to align it better to ServiceNow's best practice and things like service graph governance. And so we are very much adhering to that, and we're still only using integration, only using IRE. Everything is going to the proper tables and fields, et cetera. But that's really it. We are also, you'll notice that compatibility doesn't have Washington on that right now, but we are currently going through a review to get that one released. So we'll have that. All indications so far, there's no compatibility issue with Washington, but it'll be official here soon.
So that's really important. A really important point, Stephen, is it's more of a, I don't want to be, I'll be candid with the audience here, but it's more of an exercise now to get certification as opposed to a technical, really deep conversation, ensuring that, the integration adheres to the methodology. And that's thanks to your work. And that's thanks to, grabbing that steering wheel and turning hard left to align to CSDM and ensuring that we're adhering to what ServiceNow is requiring of companies like Flexera that want to integrate with them. So it's more of an exercise now, a conversation, rather than all right, let's get in a room, let's really unpack this and ensure that, we have the confidence in Flexera to actually post this on our store. So, that's a huge accolade to yourself and those behind you that have worked through that. And for the customers, like you folks on the call, that should give you confidence that when you're installing and implementing the application itself, that as you move to Washington and beyond, you have the confidence that nothing's going to effectively break, if I use that term, as you move forward.
Great points. And another point towards Stephen's modesty. Some of the key things that he worked on that were critical that I'll call out right away, in addition to the common data model, the bi-directional integration. So either A, pull data from CMDB, process it, put it back, or B, take from scan data, pull it through our process, and then push into CMDB. That's one. But two, delta loads. So we recognize that there are a lot of changes that happen in your environment. And if we were only able to capture the changes and then do the deltas of what is different from your environment and just push in the deltas, that reduces and keeps your CMDB more current. And so that's a pretty powerful capability, is that delta load. And then, of course, following the lines of service graph compliant, which is a stricter approach to how data is recognized, and then the process to put it inside the CMDB, following the tables and the formats and the common service data model that's recommended. And so to Clayton's point, to have it a certified integration is different than just an integration. It's certified because it gets battle tested by ServiceNow, and then they have to put their stamp on it to allow us to put it in the store. So great points. We wanted to make sure we spent time on this so that you felt confident in approaching this. All right. We did a few scenarios. A lot of our customers will say, it's great, it's technology. Okay, I get it. But what's in it for me? And what am I going to get? What's the before and what's the after? What's the value? And so this is a screen here where we kind of put together the before, some of the negative consequences, and then the after, and then some of the positive business outcomes. I've been in this industry a long, long time, and we've been grappling with the CMDB my entire career. And when people say, is ITIL going away? And I'll say, the day that the CMDB goes away, then maybe you look at it. But until the CMDB goes away, ITIL is here for the long journey. And so to make sure that we're addressing the challenges and then addressing the negative consequences. So wanted to put that out there. Hopefully that helps in your discussion. And then as we continue to leverage the platform, with the better decision. So you're seeing here an example dashboard, which Stephen's going to show us.
Dashboard.
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that. So this just calls out some of the highlights. I wanted to work through a couple more of these slides so that we leave plenty of time for Stephen's demo. When customers ask us, they're like, okay, Flexera, we understand that you're able to take our scan data. We understand that you could take our data from the CMDB. And ServiceNow tells us it's good enough until it's not. Until it's not. And so what we wanted to do in these next couple of slides is really show you the breadth and depth, the fidelity as to why it's so important to get the data right. I mean, if the CMDB is the one that runs the system of record for your entire corporation, it's got to be right. It's got to be as close to the truth as you can get. Otherwise, it could be costly mistakes, solving the wrong problem, addressing the wrong device. And then it has a ripple effect, especially when you crank it up with automation and you have servers that are notifying and opening up incidents, which then get the problems and then escalates to changes. And then you do it at scale, there's impact. So we'll walk through these to help show the value. And then I think then the demo just sets the stage. Clayton, you want to take us through this a little bit?
Sure. I think it's if anybody's ever looked at an export of SCCM data, my palms are sweating in the office already just looking at this. I've spent countless hours with my team trying to ascertain raw data, and to Mark's point, huddling with the team prior to actually being able to present the data to whomever needed to consume it, whether it's our internal customers within IT, whether it's the business or executives, etc. So we're looking at 15%. If you think about that number, 15% of raw discovery data is relevant, right? So all of that noise, we as practitioners need to go through and actually comb through that data and make sense of it. We're leveraging normalization tools such as ServiceNow. I think the next slide will build a little bit here. What we'll see is ServiceNow does a pretty good job, right? They have the content packs from both a ham and a SAM perspective, but there are gaps. We're looking at this. This is an export, an actual snap from one of our instances that we've actually run this through, and it starts to actually provide that separation between publisher and product. There are still gaps we can look through the data here. We're missing some versioning information. There's gaps in what we're calling things, etc. And that's really foundationally because ServiceNow, the content libraries themselves are still relatively new, to be honest. If you look at Technopedia and you look at the decades of data that we've actually curated and loaded and maintained within that reference library, there are gaps that we can see right off the bat. Now, for an organization just getting started in the journey, leveraging base normalization just to get going, this might be good enough. For organizations that are more advanced, that really want to dig in and leverage the data to drive process, this is definitely not where we want to be, right? And what ends up happening is practitioners like myself spend the time to fill those gaps. And then we can see here the final example about that same data set, leveraging Technopedia, how we bring in and we're able to contextualize that data, right? So again, you're not spending the time mining and cleaning and addressing the data. You're actually able to consume that data.
And some good points to keep in mind. Our industry is ever evolving, and there's mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, products that go end of life, new products that are introduced. It's evolving every day. As you're aware, Technopedia gets 4,500 updates per day. And when we ask, and we're like, well, what are all those updates? It gets down to this granularity that we're maintaining so that we put you in a position of strength and of good quality data, so that when you're executing the systems of record throughout its ITIL processes and ITOM processes, it's the accuracy is higher. And that's why we really pride ourselves on the quality data. And this is just one small example.
Yeah.
Great. Let's
okay. Just some quick visuals here we can kind of showcase of what we're talking about here from a normalization perspective, right? So we're looking, I think the slide speaks for itself. Again, this is real snaps. This is in pretty demo environments. We actually have run this and done comparisons with real data to ensure that Flexera, we put our money where our mouth is, to be really frank and honest with the folks on the call, and this just speaks to itself. So we could probably drive this one. We could probably go to the next one, showing how we're actually able to affect and normalize from a software model perspective. Real quick story on software models for those that are really familiar with ServiceNow. If we're bringing in and creating discovery models, and that needs to then match into an actual software model that we either drive, a catalog item from, or we want to hang entitlement information, we want to build out the model. If those don't align, if there's not enough fidelity in the discovered software model, you're going to have to manually create that software model, not the discovery model, the software model, right, in order to actually leverage that model. Now, let's say something changes. Your organization's created that software model, we're driving, or even a hardware model with this example, we're driving a refresh program, and we're planning on refreshing, the EliteBook G7s, right? How are we able to trust what we're actually planning on refreshing, because there isn't a sync between both of those discovery and actually what we're using as the model, right? So right away, your teams would have to comb through all of this and take stock of each individual models as it relates to that, the G7 pick on that, to ensure that we understand what's out there in our environment to actually plan the refresh.
Great. And then there's a really good question that comes in. Does software recognition and normalization have a limited life with such a large proportion of software getting delivered as SaaS only now? So there's this kind of a two-part question. I think part of why you would subscribe and get access to Technopedia for your normalization is because the industry evolves at a very rapid pace. And when we talk about a hybrid estate, you still have on-prem, you probably still have your own data center, and you probably have cloud. And then as the second part of the question goes towards SaaS. So SaaS, I think, we have SaaS Manager, and we have a whole process around SaaS. But for those that still have the on-prem and data centers and in the cloud, this information is still critical. It's still critical so that when you're opening up tickets, you're solving problems, vulnerabilities. A lot of times vulnerability is on a particular ... version. And if you're up or below, you're fine. But if you're on it, then that's the one that needs to be rectified. And if it comes across the scans wrong, we like to say that the hackers only have to get one right. But you as a security, you have to defend them all. And it's hard to defend if your data is not accurate. And so that's a key element. Well, it looks like we're getting close here. So let me
maybe just a real quick comment to Lorraine on that point. I don't think it's ever going away. Think about what we're doing with containers, right? Think about the software that we're now running in containers, right? We still need to understand and be able to manage that. We're cutting edge Flexera, thinking about not only inventorying containers from a software perspective, but providing the ability to actually manage and optimize licenses within that containerized environment. So I think normalization or recognition, it's not going away. It's not a limited lifespan. I think we'll see a lot more of that, and we need to be more creative and innovative in the way that we leverage that capability as we're running, spinning up cloud environments, containerized environments. SaaS is just a swipe of our credit card, right? So we are very cognizant of that at Flexera. That's a really good question.
Yeah. I think this just kind of continues the dialogue. It zooms in a little bit more, but I think we covered this quite well.
Yeah,
and I agree. Yeah, and then the data enrichment that we're adding and that clarity. So it's beautiful, clean data. And then we put those enrichment content packs. There's hardware lifecycle, software lifecycle, there's vulnerability, there's open source. So yeah, there's many enrichments that we're able to do. And without further ado, and a minute to spare.
Yeah, I was saying in the next release, we're also going to have the hardware specification information in there too. So it's in terms of some power consumption dimensions, things like that available. So
for sustainability.
Yeah. Okay, let me see, get my screen. Okay, and let me share, and can you all see is it working? There it goes, I think.
Yeah, I think it takes a minute to come up, and I think it comes up on a separate window.
For us, we can't tell. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you aren't seeing my screen out there, please mention it in the Q&A and let us know, but I think you should be.
Yeah.
So I have heard that this is a technical crowd, so I'm going to treat it like such, and I'm going to kind of go through the technical aspects of this integration, how it works, configuration a bit, nuts and bolts. So hopefully I won't go super deep, but I'll go deep enough. So the integration, we got Flexera 1. There are some integration properties. I don't want to waste people's time going through some of this stuff. But essentially, you can set up the exports. I should say, in terms of export properties, there's queries here. These work just like a table query. So if you want to set up, decide what data you want to export out of ServiceNow into Flexera, it's really no more difficult than going to a computer table and then filtering it on how you want to filter it, right? Yeah, that's it. So show matching here. I want to only do things that are installed, and maybe all I want to, I don't know why someone would choose this, but so maybe only you want to export Windows servers to Flexera for some reason. You come over here, you copy the query, you go back. And you paste the query into there, just like you would if you were going to do like a encoded query in a script or something, and that's it. That's all you have to do in order to build that filter. So do the same thing for Netgear, same thing for software. Let's go back to the Flexera application. You can schedule the export. The schedules are just using the built-in schedule script executions in ServiceNow for both imports and exports. So you can see like a snapshot, Delta runs, can schedule. And then let's see, job trackers. So this is basically to keep an eye on what is being imported and exported. If you open one of these up, you'll be able to see the different data sets that get imported and ingested and how much is in each of those. And you also see things like a resume token that goes back to the deltas. So it knows when you pass that back, and it knows where to pick up in terms of the data set. And then there's a connection setup. This is all you need to do. Put in a refresh token, the org ID. This will get you connected over to the Flexera side, so the deltas will run. And then I guess I'll talk about a little bit in terms of the import properties. So these were kind of a carryover from the previous integration in a sense, but also added to act as more of a safeguard. These, I want to be clear, are really not meant to take the place of configuration in ServiceNow. They exist to basically stop data from being imported, hopefully until the point of which you can get configuration set up to try to prevent accidents. That's really the goal here. Although there are some that are more useful, and then like I would want to keep. Most of these I feel like are really not even necessary, but they're, again, it's a safety mechanism. The coalesce field for company, for example, I recommend name, but you also could do it by Technopedia ID if you really want to have some separation between the records that we're managing and the ones that another data source might be. And then depending on your journey in network gear, how early you came into it. You might be populating the parent table, or you might be populating the child tables, but both options exist in terms of how this data, how this integration can populate data. So those ones are relevant. Let's see here, robust transform maps. Everything with this integration, of course, is using IRE Integration Hub. That goes for robust transform maps. So we have ones for business service information, hardware, Technopedia, which is going to be your models, the lifecycle details, network adapters, software inventory, and software models and lifecycle. And moving on, because I don't want it. And if you have a question about anything in specific about how any of this stuff works, feel free to jump in and let me know, ask a question. Someone can interrupt me.
Can you show the dashboards that happen on the other side?
I'll get to it. Patience. Okay. No,
I'm excited to see it.
Let's see here. So we went through the job trackers. Okay, yeah. So talking about IRE, the whole process here, when you were going to configure this integration, you would start with the integration properties. I guess I'll show that real quick, where you can prevent IRE class switch on update, enable business service mapping, enable a test load, say how many records you want to load in that test load. That helps a lot for initial configuration, getting, testing things out. Saves a bunch of time. You don't want to have to load 20 million records to just test a configuration change. The IRE class switch on update is a system property that you can enable. And that's going to depend on what your data source is and where those data sources are pointed to. If your data source is like ServiceNow Discovery, for example, you probably want to turn that on because you don't want Flexera. If the way we see the class is different than the way your discovery source sees the class, you may or may not want us to update that. It really is a kind of a case-by-case basis, I would say there. But if the data sources are being ingested through Flexera first, which I generally would recommend, because you end up with a cleaner result in the tables, because you can get that deduplication happening first. You can get all the irrelevant data cleansed out, and then you just end up with the like the cleaner normalized data in ServiceNow, opposed to having all the raw data, discovery data there as well. Then you would want to leave that off because we're the ones creating the records to begin with. And so if Flexera sees a difference in the way that it should be classified based on new information, you would want to update that class. Going from there, you would go through the import properties, which I showed you, do the connection setup to go ahead and establish a connection, although I guess I wouldn't recommend doing that before you go to your CI class manager. Oops. And this is where IRE IRE comes in with both transform maps and the staging data, but this is where you really start to manage that. If I can get to the, there we go. Hardware. So most of the IRE default rules exist on the hardware parent class. So we can go to identification rules and you can see those. The integration doesn't add any new ones to hardware or change anything. It's going to use whatever it is that you have in your environment set up. We did recently add one that will be in the next release for software installations. This only will apply if we look at the conditions for it, if it's a Flexera, is it a discovery source? The reason we added that is because otherwise it's using display name and version. And we found that it was coalescing improperly with that because the display name and version isn't specific enough. And if you have the primary key values in the system to essentially relate software installations, discovery models, and your end software models, why wouldn't you want to also use that primary key value, which is more specific than just display name and version, to also coalesce the software installations on the device? So that is something that we are you'll see in the next release that we've added, and that definitely is helping. Let me find, talking about, okay, so identification rules. Go and talk about reconciliation rules, which I think are the most important thing to understand here. So this is when you have your multi-source CMDB. You can see in this scenario, we have rules set up for ServiceNow, rules set up for Flexera 1. This is a very common look at what you might expect if someone has ServiceNow as their primary discovery source. And what you're seeing here, let me open this up, is, whoops, actually I was playing around with this the other day, that it really should be 100, is that ServiceNow should have priority in that scenario over all the values and attributes in the class in order to populate and create the records and maintain those computer records. Where you would want to, in order to gain the advantage of from Flexera, and in order to normalize that data and to add the lifecycle information to that information, that data, that's where you'd want to make a reconciliation rule that actually had, well, yeah, I guess that actually is correct. It should be 100 because for these two values, it has priority. Where Flexera has priority, but it only has priority for model ID and model number, for example. Model ID is the reference field from the model. That'll give you the, be able to relate the computer device to the normalized model and let Flexera manage that piece of that record. And model numbers, I would say it's optional, but most people want to do that. And then the other one I see customers frequently wanting us to normalize is the operating system. But again, it really depends on your preferences. Anything yet? Nope. Okay. Hopefully I'm not going way too deep on it. But again, I heard you all are a technical crowd, so stick with me, hopefully. All right. And the other piece of information here that's really important to understand is the sys object source table. Let's go with list. So part of any good integration hub integration, anything that it's going to be, especially service graph connectors, et cetera, like SCCM, they all write to this table. This is it's very important for what I was just showing you. Reconciliation rules are going to use the information in this table to understand which data source has written to what record and what they've written to, et cetera. So it's vital that any data source that is pushing data to your CMDB is writing to this table. So you'll have the name of the data source here. You'll have, this is the Flexera's ID for the record. And then you have the record in ServiceNow. And the way IRE works is actually identification rules don't even apply if it finds a pre-existing relationship. So it looks at this table first. If it finds a pre-existing relationship between the data source and the record, then it just says, okay, this is the right record because this is the ID from the data source. And I've already got a pre-existing relationship here. We're good. We don't even need we don't need identification rules to kick in. If it doesn't, then it'll go through the identification rules. I will say that I have seen times when, especially because this table can grow over time, things can change, that it doesn't hurt to clear this table out occasionally and refresh those relationships, because sometimes they can diverge from what you have as far as like your fresh data occasionally. It's not very common, doesn't happen very quickly, but just a recommendation I'll toss out there from what I've seen. And if you start having issues with IRE improperly coalescing on things, then that's usually a good thing, good exercise to go through. So let's see here. Import, export properties. All right. So I guess am I ready to go into? Yeah. All right. We'll look at the dashboards. I'll make Mark happy.
Thank you.
So here's the dashboard. This is one of the dashboards we have in here. This is just, it's an example. There's a lot more you could do with the information that we have in this system than what I have in this dashboard. But this is stuff that comes out of the box for it. So you have like your different normalized computers by class. This one, normalized models and end of sale or extended support within 1 year to give you a little bit of a heads up that, hey, this model is in use and it's getting close to being at the end of life. So might want to look at that for prioritization of resources. And then you got your top 10 normalized hardware models, which ones are being utilized most in your environment. VM, not surprised to see that that's a big one. And then see here, we got precision mobile workstations, network gear by class, normalized computers by manufacturer. So you can kind of get an idea of which, what computers are you using the most of in terms of your environment, what's out there, normalized network gear models, manufacturer model sprawl. So you can look at here, right here, you can see, wow, we have 77 different Dell models that are active in our environment right now. That's a lot to manage. I would hope that, again, this is a demo data set. I would hope that, but it happens. I mean, I'm sure Clayton can speak to it too. It really can get that bad or worse. And if you've ever worked on the desk side support end of things, like I did once upon a time, I can tell you that becomes a pain in the rear to manage because you have to think about all your different images and all of the different little complexities for each one of those models. And it definitely complicates things. So it's good to know, good to understand. Can't address what you can't see. So it's important to provide that insight.
I think really important here, Stephen, as well, is again, we've just created dashboards based off of use cases and conversations we've had with customers.
Yeah.
But because the data is in service now, right? I've seen operational teams as they're building out their workspaces. If they have a workspace for their IT asset management team, they have a service desk workspace, etc. The data's there, right?
Yeah.
So building those operational dashboards right within ServiceNow, so the teams don't have to swivel seat between two platforms. That's what we're really showing here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see that we have 125 Windows servers that are technically out of life in this environment. A lot of useful insights and information there. And then software. Let's click on that. Okay, so this is talking about end of life. So we have different ways we can view this data: end of life within a year, end of extended support, or obsolete within a year. You can look at group it by product or categories or the software category. I would say, generally products the most useful to understand. Version sprawl for your different products. So got 80 different models in the environment in use right now for Java runtime, JRE. That's quite a bit. Java Development Kit, Firefox. So a lot of, again, in this demo data set, but it's good to understand what kind of sprawl you have between the actual software versions out there. And then category sprawl is also is important to understand too, because it's fine that you have the actual software out in your environment being used that could be, some potential big cost savings there. And then end of support software. Now that's one of the big ones that people are usually most interested in, wanting to know what software is installed out there that is no longer being updated and potentially a security risk. And so could switch this to being grouped by class. And then you can see that you've got a bunch installed on some Windows servers, and that is probably a major concern. So you would want to dig into that and start addressing that probably immediately if this was a real environment. But you can't fix what you can't see, and that's why this is all important.
Great. Well, I think we're at the top of the hour.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully this was insightful. And obviously, if you have more questions, want a deeper dive, want to look at it from your perspective, we're happy to put this together and show you in more depth and how it relates to you.
Oh, there is one piece. I'm sorry. I'm going to jump in here too. One common issue that I've had experience with customers where they've run into an issue actually has to do with software life cycles. And I want to explain to these dashboards and the reports that are based on them are possible because of the different data source views that we created in ServiceNow, that we was able to combine data from different tables. And if anyone here has tried to do reports like this for life cycle information for software, you'll understand the pain point there. Because life cycle information for software does not have a direct relationship to an actual software model. It's basically just uses, let me just do software model. Sorry, run over here a minute. If you can stick around long enough, I'll show you. All right, let's take a look. Software model. And you can see the different life cycles here, but the life cycles are being associated to it by a filter, not a reference. So if you try and do a report on that, it's really difficult. And sometimes you'll see a little more generic. Let me see if I can find one where it really is painfully obvious. Why not? Let's see here. No, come on now. I should have found one ahead of time. So you'll see sometimes when that filter is not specific enough, and what you'll end up with essentially is, I won't dig it. I won't keep going. What you'll end up with is you'll have more than 3, like these ones you'd expect. You want to have, I need to change that. Your general availability, end of life extended support. What you're not seeing here is there's also a calculated phase start date field, which is where those 2 are blank because there's going to be calculated information as well. But you'll have like 10 different lifecycle records, and trying to figure out which one's related to which and doing reporting on that is a nightmare. So there are, and in the Flexera integration, we have those database views that we created for you. They're available. You can use them for your own reporting. You can use them to build your own dashboards. But it connects the hardware, the life cycle, and the model information all together for you. So just a little FYI there, and I'm done.
All right, no worries. Yeah, thank you for the additional insight. All right, well, let's go ahead and call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Please feel free to follow up with us if you have any questions, other topics, and thanks for your participation. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.